Following is a special hand-picked episode of Blue Sky specifically for our Rewind and Recharge Summer Series. Enjoy. From the studios of the Optimism Institute, welcome to Blue Sky, where we share stories and insights to remind us that there is always blue sky above. Sometimes you just have to get your head above the clouds to see it. I'm your host, Bill Burke. At the risk of sounding like Bill Hader's Stefan character on Saturday Night Live, the story of today's guest has everything. A romance, a family, career triumphs, sudden personal tragedy, and remarkable comebacks. Lee Woodruff and her husband Bob appeared to have it all. They met in college as friends, but later married and had 4 children. Bob's relatively late career change from lawyer to television journalist resulted in remarkable success, culminating in his being named as one of the co-anchors of ABC's World News Tonight, stepping in to replace the legendary Peter Jennings. But in an instant, all of this changed, and the story of Lee, Bob, and their family's resilience, perseverance, and optimism is inspiring, as you will soon hear. Lee Woodruff is a person of many talents. She's a New York Times bestselling author, freelance writer, public speaker, on-air talent, media trainer, coach, charitable foundation builder, and more. She and her husband have helped put a face on the serious issue of traumatic brain injury among returning Iraq War veterans. They founded the Bob Woodruff Foundation to help injured service members and their families heal from the wounds of war. To date, the nonprofit foundation has raised more than $100 million and has invested in grassroots organizations and programs around the country that are helping veterans reintegrate into their communities. Lee has been a contributing reporter for ABC's Good Morning America and CBS This Morning. Her best-selling book, Perfectly Imperfect, A Life in Progress, was followed by her first novel, Those We Love Most, which became a New York Times bestseller. I hope you enjoy this Blue Sky conversation with Lee Woodruff as much as I did. Lee Woodruff, welcome to the Blue Sky podcast.
I'm so happy to be here.
I am thrilled to have you on. You have an incredible background, incredible life story. You're a journalist, author, public speaker, media trainer, foundation founder and leader, which makes it very intimidating to me to figure out where to start. So I'll take the easy route and let's do some easy biographical background. You attended Colgate University where you met your college sweetheart, Bob Woodruff. He went off to law school, but you got into PR and marketing. Can you talk about those sort of parallel careers? Because then they eventually sort of came back together.
They did. And I met Bob in college, but he was not my sweetheart.
Ooh,
so
here we go. Let's go.
Yeah, let's go. Because, let's correct the record there. He had a lovely girlfriend for all 4 years. But I knew who he was.
Yeah.
And we ran into each other in New York while he was in law school at Michigan and I was working. And that was it. We went out to dinner and that was, I knew he was a good guy. So when you've had that college connection, you can start on square 3.
Yes.
And that's what we did. But he was already in law school. And when he got out, he had to make a choice of where to go. And I don't think he would have chosen New York if it weren't for the fact that I think we were pretty serious. So he ended up in New York.
Yeah.
It was 1986 and there was a big Black Friday crash.
Yes.
So he was supposed to be doing all this M&A and there was no merging and no acquiring. Yeah. And he was super bored at his desk and had taken Mandarin Chinese in law school because he believed that China would be the future when it could get its act together. So, yeah. And he said, hey, I think I'm going to go to China and teach because there's nothing happening here in law. And would you come with me? And I said, I will come with you with a commitment. I'm not giving up my New York apartment. You know New York apartments. It's hard to find them.
You better put a ring on it, is what you said.
Put a ring on that baby, or at least let my parents know that I'm not living in sin. And so that's what happened. We got married really fast and we went over there.
Wow.
So Bob was teaching American law to these students, and they began to demonstrate. And the anniversary, actually, we're taping this day on June 3rd. The anniversary of all this is tomorrow on
Incredible.
June 4th. And of course, as we know, the tanks rolled in and shot at students. We had 3 students who were killed on our campus, and they were brought back on blocks of ice with, this is a little morbid, but with the blood draining out of the bullet holes down with the melting ice, so that the
Wow.
students could honor their fellow, students who had been sacrificed in this. So Bob was translating, because he spoke Mandarin, for CBS News.
Oh.
And he was on the square when the tanks rolled in, and that was it for him. He just said, the law is never going to do it for me again. And I said, being in PR and working with all these people, hey, if you think that you're going to start out your journalism career covering Tiananmen Square, you're going to be back in like Market 920.
Totally.
Covering the sanitation strike in somewhere, no one's ever heard of. And that's what we did. We went back and went to a tiny little market in Northern California, Redding. I took a massive pay cut. He was making 12 grand a year. We had a baby who was 3 months old at that time. We were never happier.
Incredible. And then I know the industry, his path to the top job in television news was so fast. I mean, he's a great looking guy. He's incredibly articulate. He was a natural, but that was a rocket ship experience, it seems to me.
Well, I think it was, and I always believed in him. And he had this goal to get to the network by 35, which he achieved. But remember that he also had a law degree. Like when in local news, and you do know this business because you grew up in it, and it was your business as well. In local news, a lot of people are right out of J school, right? Or they're super young. So here's this guy who's switched careers at age 30, and he had a little bit of a leg up, and then he was good at what he did. So he did move quickly.
And so it's hard. There are people who are too young to remember listening to this, and then some even who are old enough to remember who forget what a big deal it was to be one of the big 3 anchors. There's no equivalent today. I was trying to think of an equivalent today, and there just isn't one. And not only did Bob get named to be a co-anchor of ABC, he was succeeding the legend, a small street named after him by the ABC headquarters, Peter Jennings. What was that like? And I mean, did you look at each other like, I can't believe this is happening? Tell me what that was like.
I just remember being so elated for Bob when this happened. And the thing I love about, one of the many things I love about my husband, is he never really wanted to be anchor. By that, I mean, it wasn't what he was seeking. He loved, as did Peter, just being out in the field and telling stories. So you don't, as he said, you don't turn this down when it comes around. He had turned down the GMA position that Robin Roberts initially had, which was the newsreader position. So they wanted him to come back from London, where we were, and take that position. And obviously it would have been a potential step to the chair.
Sure.
And one of the other things I love about him is he said, no, that's not what I want to do. Now, you could have really gotten dinged for that.
Right.
But chasing the story and telling the story were what he wanted. So this, with Elizabeth and Bob, the way this was conceived, and this is when digital news was starting and everything else, was one anchor would be in the studio and the other would be in the field. And so Bob loved that idea because that's who he is.
So he, I believe, was named to that job late 2005, and it's weeks later that he's over in Iraq.
Yeah.
Can you tell us, sort of from your perspective, tell us what happened to Bob and how you got the news, and then where did your life go from there?
So Bob was in Iraq for something like the 9th time. He'd been there so many times. He'd been embedded for 3 months during the invasion. And this was so routine to me. During the war, when he was embedded, I was worried every night before I went to bed. But he left. He was covering a State of the Union for President Bush. And it was supposed to be about how we hadn't won, but we were making things safer. So my guard was so down when I got that phone call. And I was actually in Disney World.
Oh, gosh.
So it was a total cognitive dissonance because it was right around the time of when I'd scheduled a wake-up call. And instead it was David Weston, who you know from the ABC family, saying, Bob's been hit. He's taken shrapnel to the brain and he's getting rushed into surgery. And we've been trying to reach you. So my mind could not go there. I just had to shut that down, deal with getting the kids out of Disney World, getting home and getting over to Landstuhl, Germany, where he was being flown completely in a coma. And I didn't know enough to know how bad this was, and in some way that saved me, to
Right.
not go on Google, to not know what a traumatic brain injury was. It would have been harder to know that stuff. I made a conscious decision to stay in a bubble. I felt like that would, if I didn't fall to my knees and know all these worst case scenarios, maybe I could have a little bit of hope left.
So I had it wrong. Lee and Bob Woodruff weren't sweethearts in college, but it wasn't too long after graduation that they knew they wanted to be together. Lee wisely pushed for a commitment before they headed overseas, and it was a pretty wild turn of events to find them on the ground and directly impacted by the Tiananmen Square protests and massacre. The Mandarin-speaking and telegenic Bob Woodruff found himself reporting on the breaking story and discovered that TV reporting was his love and where he wanted to take his career. So it was off to Redding, California to start what would be Bob's rapid ascent up the ranks of TV news, resulting in being named to one of the ultimate jobs in that field, co-anchoring ABC's World News Tonight. But as we've heard, the dream job quickly turned into a nightmare. And getting back to our conversation, I wanted Lee to talk some more about what it was like to hear the news of Bob's injury. And Lee, you're at Disney. How many children and what were their ages?
4 kids. They were 14, 12, 5, and 5.
Wow.
So 2 different conversations, Team A and Team B, 2 different, daddy has a boo-boo conversation with kindergartner and
right.
like, what's happening, Mom? Dad's on CNN, which is what happened to me.
It was a big news story, sure.
Before I could get back in and tell the kids. I was walking around this little lake in Disney World to call his mom, my parents, and then my friend Melanie Bloom, whose husband David had died in Iraq.
Yes.
They were our best friends. And by that time, CNN had gone with it, as they should have.
It was newsworthy. Yeah. So, okay, but you've got to get over to Germany. You're managing the kids. I mean, hopefully you had, was it family or some help to take care of that? You've got, I mean, I can't even imagine the sort of full court press you're in trying to organize all this.
It was surreal. But now, pro tip here, because we're all about like the good stuff in life.
Yes.
And I, of course, hit on this way later with the benefit of hindsight. There were 4 Fs, the 4 legs of my stool, beyond which I could never have gotten through this.
Yep.
And I realized they all started with F, but you just named 2 of them, family and friends,
yep.
who immediately rushed into the home, started doing what needed to happen with meals, with taking the kids places. So family and friends, funny, because boy, do you need a sense of humor in life. And then faith. And that means different things to different people, but you've got to just turn it over sometimes and just say, I'm going to believe that your dad is going to be better.
Amazing.
So that stuff kicked in different small ways in different moments. But in that immediate flying back from Disney, my house was buzzing. People were in there packing me to go.
Yeah. They
were getting food. It was incredible. You've seen this happen when something goes wrong with families.
It's incredible. So he then started what was a very slow, very gradual, presumably ongoing recovery from this injury. Very quickly, though, you all started the Bob Woodruff Foundation. Can you talk about where in this process, because I'm sure, again, you've got this, maintaining your family, keeping your kids supported, supporting your husband, but then you think even bigger and let's support people who have been injured in similar ways but are in the military. How did that happen so quickly, and what was the thought process?
It happened after Bob woke up. I have to be honest. If Bob were going to have, if he would have been very impaired or in a nursing home, as I was told he probably would be, I'm not sure I would have had the wherewithal to do what we did. It would have been a different kind of triage. But Bob's brother Dave and I sort of said to each other, look, if he gets better, we're getting a ridiculous amount of attention for this. And I didn't really I didn't watch television for a year. I didn't turn the news on for a year. I didn't want to see a news world without my husband in it. And I didn't have any interest in seeing how they were covering what was happening with him. But I knew from other people that it was a big story. And we got the same attention in the military hospital that all of the veterans did. But then the attention that we got after that, because Bob was the anchor, when he went on to a rehab hospital privately, and all of the benefits we had for ABC and Disney to take care of the insurance issues, the medical costs, like other families don't have that.
Right.
So it felt like this was also a very pivotal point in the war where people were just starting to talk about traumatic brain injuries as the signature wounds of the war. And it just felt like we needed to do something with all of that, with our story, with the fact that we were in the public eye for that 15 minutes of fame. We needed to use it. And I will tell you that, boy, isn't she a hero? Isn't she made? No, part of that is selfish
Sure.
because I couldn't rewind the tape. I couldn't change what happened. And let me just remove any kind of disabuse you of any notion that I'm any kind of saint, because all of that stuff just is icky to me.
Right.
If I could take all of this back and have this not have happened, I would.
Absolutely.
Including the $100 million that we've raised for veterans. Isn't that an awful thing to say? I know it's not possible, so that's why I can say it. But you just have to do what you can to use your story to help other people, because that helps you heal.
This Lee is hitting at what I really wanted to talk about, and you've done it. Thank you. Which is, to me, life is going to hand you difficulties. Now you were given a whopper, and a high profile whopper, and a very serious one, but everybody faces it. And it sounds trite, but it's not whether this happens, it's how you respond to it. And so I think my sense is you all put on a clinic in terms of how to respond to this in a positive way. Were there times in there before you were able to make that sort of pivot where you thought, why me? Why us? Did you ever get down, or were you just going so hard and so forward that that's just how you're wired, and you took sort of the optimistic approach from the get-go?
I think if someone tells you they don't have a moment where so many different things can happen, where you do sort of say, God, why us? Or, like every family, we had other little things that had happened, health stuff with kids and other things. And so what you quickly learn is there's no max, right? The thought occurred to me that we weren't done, that other things could happen. And that could have been a crippling thought, but for some reason it was an ennobling thought. So
Yes.
so live every day. Like that does allow you to live every day.
Yep.
I'm going to share a story with you that changed the why me trajectory for me. And it was, so Bob was in a coma for 36 days. And at the end of that 36th day, they were basically saying, look, he's physically healed, but he's not responding to anything when we turn the meds down. So he's probably going to have to go to an acute care nursing home because he can't do rehab. So I was at the very end of my tank. And this is just sort of the magic moment that the next day he woke up, and he woke up fully, he went from 0 to awake, which is not supposed to happen. You're supposed to begin to titrate the medication down and then have somebody start coming out of it, but he wasn't coming out of it when they did it. So he woke up, he started speaking Mandarin and French because his English language file had been the one that was primarily impacted.
Really?
Yeah. And day 2, and they were speaking a lot of gibberish too, because it was all in the speech and language center. Day 2, they had told me, get ready, because he's going to be very depressed. And that is a hallmark of a brain injury. It is one that he's largely avoided, which is incredible. But I said, so are you thinking, why me? Are you feeling like you just got this big job and this happened to you? Because I was just trying to figure out where's his psyche at. And he looked at me like a little boy. I'll never forget. He said, well, why not me? Like, what makes me any different than the 25-year-old kid from Nebraska who's like, just because I'm on TV? Like, what the heck? So I thought, okay, well, that's great. That's the guy married.
Yeah.
And that also set the tone. Like, if he's not going to feel sorry for himself, this is his battle to battle back, then what right do I have?
Amazing. And, I hadn't thought about it until you just told that story. I imagine his many trips over there before helped with that a lot too, because if this had happened on his first trip, he might not have had all that experience of watching all these young, mostly men and women, going through these hardships over there. And that probably gave him a context he might not have had if he hadn't had all that experience.
It's a really insightful point. I think you're right. Yeah.
Hard to imagine being in Lee's shoes when she hears about her husband's injury thousands of miles and seemingly worlds away from being at a Disney theme park with her 4 young children. And as hard as this all would be to explain to your kids, Lee Woodruff's case is complicated by the large spread in their ages and levels of maturity. And imagine this happening to your husband and your kids hearing about it first on CNN. When explaining how she got through this all, she offers a helpful mnemonic, the 4 F's of family, friends, funny, and faith. As her husband lay in what would ultimately be a 36-day coma, Lee Woodruff had her why me moments. But she was grateful for the remarkable care that Bob received, largely because he was so well supported by his company. And knowing that so many of our troops had experienced similar or worse injuries without such support, helped her find the strength and motivation to create the Bob Woodruff Foundation. And after Bob quite suddenly emerged from his coma, speaking primarily Mandarin and French, imagine what that was like. Instead of experiencing the predicted depression that many in his condition do, Bob asked the question, why not me? And accelerated Lee's desire to help the many others who'd had traumatic brain injuries fighting our war in Iraq. And now, getting back to our conversation and more about Bob Woodruff's return to better health. His recovery continues to be remarkable. Am I right? I mean, that was one thing that he wasn't expected to accomplish, get out of the coma the way he did. And his recovery, I mean, he certainly speaks perfectly good English now and everything else. Yeah. Can you talk quickly about that?
Yeah, he drove himself. I think the interesting thing about a brain injury is no two are alike. So it's where you're injured and how much you had going into it. I'm really proud of his recovery. I'm also really careful because not everybody does recover that same way. So I'm so conscious of that. And I never want us to be seen as some model for how to do this. There's so many factors that go into it. Yes. And Bob would tell you all the ways in which he's changed. He would sit there and go, well, there's this and this and this. And I will tell you this, and it's something that I say, and I hope other people out there traveling similar roads hear this. He's doing so well, but when you love somebody and you're their spouse, you also see and miss all those little things. So for everyone out there who is in the journey of loss a little bit and looking always for the glass to be half full, because it is, and I see it that way, it's okay to miss those little things. And that's the interesting thing, excuse me, about complicated grief or ambiguous loss, which are the two things that happen when something happens, but your loved one isn't gone. Right. And what's so hard about living in that world is people are so quick to say, aren't you so lucky he's here? And yes, you're so lucky that your husband is here and he's alive and he's functioning, he's on the air. But then that takes away your ability to say, oh, Bill, I'm so sad today because I missed this. Yes. So being conscious as you go out in the world of giving people the opportunity to grieve for things that seem intangible.
Yeah, and and saying "aren't you lucky" is not a smart.
Then you've got to feel that, right?
That's not a great one. And so that's a great segue because you've written "In an Instant" was, I think, your first book, Perfectly Imperfect. You've also written an award-winning novel, remarkable. But I want to talk to you about Perfectly Imperfect: A Life in Progress. First of all, I love the title, and I've seen you. Quoted also talking about the importance of understanding imperfection and the importance, because I agree with you on this, of not, I struggle with this whole happiness movement and all the happiness literature. And that I believe it's, of course, we want to be happy, we should strive towards happiness. But I also think it sets up a false expectation that gets in people's way, frankly, of being optimistic and in a funny way, happy, right? That especially young people, I think on social media, they're not feeling happy. They go online and everybody's happy. Can you talk about this Perfectly Imperfect and how you came to grips with this notion that things are not going to be perfect, like not even close, and how that's helped you and your outlook and your ability to stay positive?
I love that question. Happiness, the right to happiness is written into our Constitution. Think about it. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
Yes.
And that's a pretty high bar because happiness is an emotion. So the thing for me is, do you get to the end of the day and do you feel satisfied? Because I don't know how you go through life 100% happy. So I think you're so right. And by the way, wouldn't that be boring? Because
so dull.
Part of the beauty of life for me is when you have a bad day. I'm now old enough where I can say to myself, guess what, Lee? It's not always going to feel like this. Tomorrow, when the sun comes up, you may be in a totally different place.
Yep.
And 9 times out of 10, I am. And that's the beauty of being able to know that life goes up and down rather than stasis. And I completely concur with you. We are chasing kind of the wrong things, and social media is only amplifying that.
Yeah.
And I think the book, which interestingly enough, in an instant was not a book. It was my journal for a year. It was an 800-page mess of me writing this down initially because I didn't know if Bob would live. And if he didn't, my children would ask me a lot of questions about what happened. And in an ICU, you're just not remembering. But it was also my therapy as a writer.
Sure.
So Perfectly Imperfect really came from a lot of the stories in that journal of our life. But it also, you're very prescient in your question because, especially for women, there is so much pressure on us to be everything. Oh, you're a working mother. Oh, you didn't make the school trip.
Oh, yeah.
And that sort of perfectly imperfect balance is, I believe that you can have as much of it all as you want. It just is going to come in chapters. It's not all at the same time.
Right.
And that we need to forgive ourselves for not going through every day feeling like, oh, I'm just so happy. This is all so wonderful.
Right. And this obsession with happiness too. I don't know who said it. I should find out because I quote it a lot. But somebody once said, the secret to being happy is not always stopping to wonder if you are. and I think, well, a lot of us, gosh, I'm not quite happy today. It's just not helpful. You also had a great line in Perfectly Imperfect that I wanted to ask you about. You said, you wrote about trying to find a positive slant in something so negative because anything else would feel like defeat.
Wow.
I think that's great. You don't remember writing that, do you?
That, Bill.
You wrote that.
Tell me more.
I just think it's a great line. So you've hit on a few of these, but when something awful like that happens to your husband, what are the positive slants? How do you find that?
I don't love this answer, but it's an honest answer. And believe it or not, at the time that Bob was injured, I was reading a book called We Need to Talk About Kevin, which is a horrible book about a child who ends up killing his classmates.
Yes.
And there are a lot of ways I could answer this question, but this is the one that comes to mind because one of the things I said to myself as I was flying over to see what was left of his body was, the only thing worse than that would be if something happened to my child. And there are so many people out there who do go through this with their children. So I feel funny even saying that because my hat is off to those people and they deserve every ounce of empathy that I have. But that, in the horror of trying to process the shock of all of this and the not knowing that is what's going to happen when he wakes up. I guess it's called worst case scenario hunting, and that worst case scenario might look different for somebody else than it did for me.
Yep.
But reading this book, the less horribleness saved me.
Lee Woodruff is very thoughtful when it comes to thinking about grief. We all know it's painful, and she also describes that it can be complicated. Yes, her husband survived his tragedy, but it's okay and understandable for her and her family to miss what's now missing. This outlook can also help us be better about letting others grieve their own circumstances in their own ways. And I really appreciate what Lee had to say about happiness. Yes, we can all strive for it. That pursuit is in our country's Declaration of Independence. But we need to be okay with not being happy all the time. That's just not going to happen. And after all, as she says, life would be boring if it did. Getting back to our conversation, I wanted Lee Woodruff to talk some more about her family's foundation.
I love to talk about the foundation, and I love to talk about the fact that we're going on 19 years, and I am a titular figurehead now. In the early days, I was out there asking lovely people like you for every dollar you had.
Yes.
And we have an incredible team in place. We started, they hate it when I say this, but it's you, so I'm going to say it. We started because we were too stupid to know anything else. In other words, we didn't have an expertise in packing backpacks particularly or building homes. But as a journalist, Bob and I, especially after the book came out and we sort of went around the country, people were putting $20 bills in our hands and saying, can you get this to a soldier? And we were also hearing about what people were doing in their communities to help injured vets who were returning home. So we had a eye on the landscape, and we decided what we would do, since we didn't have any particular expertise, was sort of become a 360 view of what the nation was doing, and then help find those best practices and
Mm,
create ways for everybody to collaborate, and then give grants. And in that way, we could be nimble. And that was actually what turned out to be, kind of, we don't know how to do anything else other than raise money, turned out to be great because we could adjust and be nimble where the needs were. So when COVID hit,
mm.
75% of our funding went to food insecurity for veterans. Who knew that that thin line for school lunches would be the
Yeah,
thing that would save some military families? So that, but without being locked into a, well, we only build houses, sorry, kind of thing, even though we all need that and that's lovely, we
right.
were able to provide needs. And I think one of the two of the things I'm really so proud of, and we've had a lot of interesting collaborations with people and convenings where we let people share, but one was finding out that our active duty service members had benefits for infertility. But if you'd gone overseas and you'd fought and you'd been injured and couldn't have children, we sort of said, hey, sorry, too bad.
Really?
Too bad you're maxing your credit card out. And so I just thought that was wrong. The law's now been changed, but we created a fund where we got drugs donated, fertility clinic services donated, and everybody got $5,000 from us. So I think we're on our 89th baby in 5 years with this fund for
That's
families that
amazing.
were unable to have children, or our government did not cover recognized same-sex marriages, or
Yep.
people who were couples and not married and wanted to have a family. So I'm really proud of that work.
Well, and I think one of the things you've done that's so terrific is, we live in a country today, for better or worse, we don't have a draft. Our armed forces tend to be people who volunteered, which leaves many of us who have not participated in that, either ourselves or as family members, very disconnected from the combat versus the years when, it might be your son going next, whether you like it or not. That everybody knows somebody who's over there. And it took, in your instance, a very famous person, your husband, having this injury that helped you. You use that. I think that's one of your silver linings, is you use that to mobilize people to be more aware of a problem that we should have all been more aware of at the beginning. Is that a fair way to describe it?
It is. And that makes us really proud to be able to do that. And to your point, how are we going to recruit people to join the military if we're not treating them the way they should be treated when
Right.
they get home? And to be fair, the federal government cannot do all of it. We're a giant country with a giant
Yes.
standing military, but that is where public-private partnerships come in, and that's where people in the community come in to help as well.
Yep. So that's been the emphasis of the foundation. You also do writing and speaking, and some of the topics you address there are related to all of this, but a little bit different. Caregiving, parenting through a crisis, healthcare from a family perspective. So these are all things that stand in the way of people staying hopeful and optimistic. Can you talk about what you've learned about caregiving? What kind of advice you give to folks who are in similar struggles to yours?
Yeah, it's hard because in the work that I do, and I write a column for AARP, there are people on their Facebook page. It's a wonderful place for people to go and connect. It's also a place where people can vent, and they need
Yeah.
that. And so again, thinking about how fortunate I am, I look at some of the people who are alone in a rural area, don't have anybody to spell them with their husband and so forth. And so I never want to be the person giving advice there, because those situations are so difficult for some people, and it's hard for everyone. You've
Sure.
lost a dad.
Yep.
We're both in that place in life, so it looks different for each one of us. And I think maybe the answer is there's no one way to do this. There's the
Yep.
right way to do this for you and what works for you. But I think the last thing I would say about that is make sure you're showing up the way you want to, so that you have no regrets.
Right.
And that's also going to look different for different people.
I think that's a huge one. You mentioned losing my father, and it was, very ordinary circumstances. He had a good long life. But when you grieve, there's one box that's great. You can check off the no regrets box. You were there when you needed to be there. You said the things you needed to be said. That'd be the free advice I give everyone. Grief is always hard, but if that life ends with a lot of regrets on your part that you could have addressed, That's a big one.
Yeah. You don't get a redo.
You do not get a redo.
Yeah.
So you exude optimism and positivity. Is that something, there's this big debate. Are you born with it? Do you nurture it? Do you develop it? Where would you put yourself, Lee Woodruff, in that continuum of born this way, work at it? Where are you?
Ooh. Ooh, no one's ever asked me that. I love that. So I think I was born this way. I'm naturally just drawn to people, and get a lot of juice off of them. And I think you're the same way. You've got the
Yeah. Yeah.
energy. But boy, do I get down about stuff, and then so I have to work at it. I have to talk to myself. I have to use some of those conceits.
Yep.
My daughter was on the phone having a bad day the other day, and then the next day was a good day at work.
Yep.
I said,
Yep.
"Okay, remember this good day, because this is what I do. On the
Yeah.
bad day, it's what I said to you earlier, I just say, okay, it's not always going to feel this way."
Right.
And that maybe is how you build resilience. Maybe that is the muscle that you work on. And as you live longer, you understand what you said earlier, that
Yep.
there are going to be curveballs, and
Yep.
it is about how you respond. And someone said this to me once, and I love it. I've never forgotten it. When the bad thing happens, you have two choices. You can get bitter, or you can get better.
Nice.
And nobody wants to be a bitter old lady. And I've really tried to live by that. Like, that's no fun. And that is also where laughter and sense of humor comes in.
Absolutely. Lee Woodruff not only had a healthy sense for the privileges she and her family had, largely stemming from Bob's stature and employment status at the time of his injury, but she used their prominence as a platform to raise money and awareness for traumatic brain injury and support of our country's active service members and veterans. And as all great entrepreneurs do, Lee and the foundation made several adjustments as conditions warranted, like turning to addressing food insecurity during COVID, or filling the gaps in fertility clinic access in the military, resulting now in the birth of the 89th baby to parents who participated in their program. Like many optimists, Lee believes she was probably born this way, but she has to work at it. And I learned a new one here. When times are tough, you can either get bitter or get better. Getting back to our final segment of this Blue Sky conversation, we'll talk a little more about optimism. I'm often asked, how do you define optimism? And there's a bunch of different ways to do it, but I've combined a couple that I've read from other people, which is, one is, an optimist believes that tomorrow will be better than today, and that they can play a role in making it so.
Love that.
And, with your daughter, it's that understanding that, this too shall pass, time is medicine. All those trite expressions happen to be true as you get older and live your life. Without getting into confidences or anything like that, how have your kids come through all this? We've talked a lot about you and how you handled your kids. This is a big deal for your children to have experienced this, the high profile nature of what happened to your husband and the age range. You had two very young kids at the time. How have they come through all this, and has this made them different, better? It's hard to know what they would have been like if you hadn't gone through this, but can you talk a little bit about that?
I love being asked that question. And they're also old enough now that I should probably ask them. For a while, I just thought, I'm not going to ask. Everybody
Yes.
looks okay at Thanksgiving.
Yeah, yeah.
So the little girls were really little. They don't remember their dad before.
Yeah.
The bigger guys, it was very hard for my son at the time. 14 is a formative age to have something like this happen. So this is where the F of faith comes in. I learned really early on not to give them too much information while this was all going on. So my daughter, the one who was having the bad day, would be constantly listening around corners and picking up the phone because she was thinking that,
Sure.
We were hiding things from her. And she asked me one night if I thought her dad would be the same. And I realized that I could run through 50 different stats and chances or percentages, but when you just up level it with a kid, I said, you know what, honey? I believe your dad will be fine. I believe God will make your dad okay. And that was all she needed to hear, was that she could put it with me. I could put it somewhere else. It doesn't have to be God. It could be whatever spiritual or faith belief you have, but that's all kids want to hear. So I just kept keeping it really broad and trying to answer really specific questions in a positive way, because I knew that's what they needed to hear. I think they're more empathetic kids than they might have been otherwise. No one has gone into healthcare, psychology, or the military, so maybe not.
Yeah.
But I think it's to your point, you can't get a control group on this. It's all they know. Their
Yep.
dad's recovered. Their dad loves them so much and always did. And at the end of the
Sure.
day, that they didn't give a rat's fanny that he was
Yeah.
on TV at all. This was their
Right.
dad,
That's
and
what
he's
they knew.
back.
Yeah.
So I think that's the net answer.
You use the word empathy too. I think when these tragic things happen, that's probably the most valuable and probably the most universal silver lining, if you will, is this sense of empathy. So you and your family look at traumatic brain injury of all sorts, and particularly in military circumstances, I would think completely differently than someone like myself who hasn't experienced it. There's the cancer club. These are clubs you don't want to be a member of, but they are clubs, and there's some huge benefit to the empathy that you have coming out of it. And I imagine as young people, your kids have it very differently than so many others.
Yeah. I think they would also tell you they were blessed too.
Yeah.
And that makes me happy because that was the end goal. I want to give you another saying in
Sure.
addition to your optimism. I love this one. Someone
Please.
told me this one. I never forgot it. You play the hand that you're dealt, but you never stop trying to get your hands on the deck. So
Ooh.
that's the it's
Yeah.
an optimist looks at the day, this
Totally.
way, but you do have some control over that too, right? How you look at the world.
I love that.
Yeah.
So what is next for Lee Woodruff? You're going to continue to grow and develop the foundation. You're speaking. Are you writing still? Like what is next for you?
I hesitate to say this because it may not go anywhere, but I just finished another novel after
Nice.
like 10 years. It's been a long hiatus, but this has been an amalgamation of different things that didn't work. So keep your fingers crossed that somebody wants to publish it and thinks it's worthy. It's still very rough.
Great.
But that felt good. And I'm loving my work, media consulting. I love working with people and what's the message they want to say? How comfortable do they want to be? What are they doing next? That's a one-on-one sort of coaching thing that at this stage of my life, I'm just loving. Yeah.
Fantastic.
Learning a lot from people, which is fun.
Well, Lee, you are an inspiration. Your story is remarkable. I know it's going to impact all of our listeners. Please give my best to your husband, Bob, and kudos to you for how you've managed all of this and the incredible work you've done in the face of tragedy to make something positive out of it and keep your own attitude so uplifting and optimistic. I really appreciate it.
Well, I love that you asked me to come on, and I'll come on anytime. I'll think of a new topic. Let's not make it about a tragedy. I'll come up with something else. But
We got it. We'll promote your novel.
Okay, deal. All right. But you are a great interviewer. So thank you for having me. I loved your questions. They were very thoughtful.
That means a lot coming from you. Thank you so much, Lee Woodruff.
Thank you, Bill.
Lee offers wise words when she reminds us that in life, we all have to play the hand we're dealt. And with her children, she's able to see now the silver linings from the challenges the family has faced, powered by faith in constantly believing that Dad's going to be okay, and by living lives now filled with an empathy that could not have been achieved without going through the tough stuff. In all, the Woodruff family story is an amazing one, and I hope you enjoyed this blue sky conversation with Lee. Before you go, we'd appreciate you leaving us a rating or review. And to be sure you don't miss any future episodes, subscribe to this podcast and follow the Optimism Institute on social media. Until next time, I'm the founder of the Optimism Institute and host of Blue Sky, Bill Burke, and I thank you for listening.